All right. Thank you for joining us on Wines Day. This is December 9th. We've got Matt Weiss from Winebow joining us tonight. My name's Zach. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the beer and wine coordinator at the Drum Co-op. Tonight we've got two wines, one called the Curator, which is mainly Chenin Blanc blend from South Africa, and then a Crianza Rioja from Cune. Two wines that we sell at the co-op. The Curator actually replaced a wine that went out of stock, and I think it's delicious. It's got a little more balance to it, I think, because of the blend. But everybody would like to cheers.
Cheers.
Get in there. Good.
Sorry. I have a very special glass for tonight because I didn't make it home before the tasting.
Oh no!
I had to improvise.
It looks like you're in your car.
No, I'm actually in an airplane.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I'm flying over England right now. Yes, I'm in my car. I had too much to do and I didn't make it home before. So.
Oh, this is good.
Yeah. Well, shall we get into the Curator then?
I think we should. I'll go ahead and share that gorgeous picture that you sent. Let me see. Give me 1 second.
So why Zach is sharing that, I'll just also tell you that, and you might have heard us talking about, not only do I work for Winebow, but I also host a podcast called the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. And we talk to anybody who's anybody in the culinary world in North Carolina. We've had Ashley Christensen on multiple times, Vivian Howard, Sam Jones, you name them, they've been on. Well, save Zach, of course, but we'll get
not yet.
And it's a podcast, so you can listen with anytime. So I highly recommend it. And we do have some great wine episodes as well. If you're seeing this screen, you are now seeing the beautiful area that is Swartland. We're in South Africa. And if you look up to the left, you can see those. I just like to give not only a little map of the area, but this is so the thing to consider about this. And one thing I want to tell you guys about the wines that I represent is we really, even though we're a relatively large distributor, we represent wines that we like to say great wine is made in the vineyard and not in the winery. So before anything, and you guys are probably experienced tasters, you know this, but wine is an agricultural product first and foremost. And the winemakers that we work with, especially Adi Badenhorst, who makes this wine, is first and foremost in service to the land. So he wants to give the end result of that wine, whoever's drinking, the best, most clear snapshot of what went in and what's going on in the vineyards that are growing those grapes. So if you go, Zach, can you go back or maybe show that map for a second? Yeah. So if you see, if you look way left on the map and you see Swartland, or can you zoom your mouse over it, Zach? It's way left and part of that orange, but yeah, way to the
other left.
Sorry, yeah, my left when I'm looking at it. So a lot of you people will know Cape Town, obviously, and this place is really incredible because you have the confluence of two major oceans coming there. And so Cape Town, where some you might have heard of Stellenbosch, makes some of the most famous wine in South Africa. But as any other place, that is getting expensive for land there because it's very excellent wine. It's starting to get world recognition. And so as things happen, things move up and further out. And so it so happens that this place, Swartland, as you go further north, we're in the southern hemisphere here. So keep in mind, it gets warmer as you go farther north, as opposed to, where we are, it gets colder. So you're going to have much more ripe fruit. And this is all, Zach, if you can go back to that picture of Swartland, this is all on the basically vineyards that are on the mountainsides. That's how they plant them there. And this is all three different types of granite. and why that's important when you think of wine, not to bore you with soils, but granite creates this unbelievable mineral quality to wine, and this backbone and structure and this flintiness. And when you think about how warm it can be in this land, and then you have that granitic soils, it really makes for deliciously balanced and complex wine. And I think that's what this is. And then on top of that, you think, okay, so this is 60% roughly Chenin Blanc, and then the blend is made up of Viognier and Chardonnay. So it's a really important blend because one, Chenin Blanc does really well in South Africa. It's referred to down there as Steen, Steen. You might have heard of it, and it grows prolifically. It grows really well, and you can get good yield out of it. So what that means, yield, as many grapes as you can, the more wine you can make. But you have to be careful when you're a farmer that you don't get too many grapes, because that's less quality in the grapes. So sometimes less is more, but it grows prodigiously, but it also grows high quality. And then you think about the rest of the blends, Chenin Blanc. By the way, since I think we have the Sullivans, and then Eagle, are you there? Or is that, I don't know, is that a live person there?
It is a live person.
Okay. So Sullivans, I'll ask you since you're there. Are you guys familiar with Chenin Blanc? Have you drank much Chenin Blanc before?
Not really, I don't think.
Well, we did a while ago, but we're not familiar. We don't know much about it.
More Viognier and some
Okay.
Chardonnay. but we're
And
not-
Chardonnay, of course. Yeah.
They're more Sauvignon Blanc people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
they're like
this-
Entre du Mer, and that's more that style versus Marlborough.
Right.
Okay. Cool. Well, then this wine should
Yeah.
pretty much be right up your alley. So
Yes.
first of all, I should tell you, it is over the last 10 years really has become the wine professional's darling. And one of the reasons that is because it's so flexible. It can go from, and the really hallowed ground for Chenin Blanc is in the Loire Valley of France. And there you can see styles of it like this that are bone dry, high in acid, but also have this rich kind of viscous mouthfeel. But it also can be made as some of the most famous sweet wine in the world. You can get it really leave some what's called residual sugar in there, so you don't ferment it fully dry. But it has enough acid that it makes a really beautifully balanced wine.
I really like the fact, like, I think you're spot on. Is like the acidity of this is really nice, where it kind of cleans everything up, and there's just like a little bit of kind of citrusy fruit quality, but it's definitely more about that minerality and that little bit of like stone fruit, and that kind of like that flintiness, I think, really comes through. That minerality comes through really, really nicely, especially for the cost of the bottle. I think it's pretty killer for what your trade-offs versus going to Loire and getting something of much higher price, but not necessarily a lot more like depth to it than what this offers.
Exactly. Yeah. This what did you say this retails for? Like $9.99?
$9.99, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
Wow.
Especially when you think of,
Wonderful.
yeah, when you think of, some of the most famous examples would be Vouvray, if you're familiar, of Chenin Blanc. And, I don't think these days you can find a solid Vouvray like less than $19.99 retail or something like that. Maybe.
I don't even have one on the shelves because the price, they've kind of priced themselves out. And for another few dollars, you can get Sancerre, or you can get Puy or something, for almost the same cost, and you're getting an even bigger kind of wine, or at least has the notoriety behind it that Chenin doesn't really have outside of Loire, or it's just poorly made, which there's no point to poorly made Chenin, especially wine in general is what I try to not carry that kind of stuff anyway. But yeah, this is really, really great stuff. I'll also share the tech sheet real quick. The tech sheet, as we normally say, this is what the vendor will send to me, and I can get it. There we go. And so it's a nice way to kind of, you get, this is a very pretty one where it shows off the bottle, kind of gives you their kind of blurb about what they do for the wine, how it's made, so the winemaking techniques, if it sees lees aging or not, which is really huge in the Loire, not to kind of circle back to that, but it also gives you your breakdown of what's actually in the bottle. It's not just, here you go, here's some grapes. They're telling you exactly. And on the back of the bottle of Curator, there's a nice little kind of blurb about what, their idea of what the curator does, like making sure that only the best fruit is used, and that their focus is like what's in the fields and then what ends up in the bottle, much like what you were saying at first, Matt.
It's too bad we don't have that kind of information right on the bottle, because that would be educational.
Sure. And there are some, I know there's some wineries or some importers that will kind of do breakdowns on the back label, but luckily you have people like me and people like Matt who are willing to join us tonight, that we can tell you all those fun things, Lynn.
Yeah,
right.
It would be rendered useless if they were all. Yeah, and what this shares a little snippet of is the winemaker here, as I mentioned earlier. His name is Adi Badenhorst, and he is a unique spirit, I will say. He is, just like a wild man, but very self-deprecating, meticulous about his winemaking, but also willing to try anything and everything. And what's great here is, so when I was talking earlier about, wine being made in the vineyards, he doesn't actually own these vineyards, but these are some of his best friends that have these vineyards, and he's still there all the time and consulting on them about how he would like them to farm these grapes, and to make sure that he's getting a wine that he likes. And then on top of that, Bartholomew Broadbent of Broadbent Selection, who imports this wine, actually helps Adi, or consults with Adi, in blending it. And Bartholomew, although he has this historic palate for some of the greatest Madeiras and ports of the world, and his father was very well renowned for that, has now kind of helped the wine world and people like us who like to drink these really just great everyday wines that are not too expensive. And they have a couple of these wines in their portfolio like this that retail for similar prices, that he just has this unique palate to figure out what's great grapes where I'm not compromising something, but I can deliver at a really affordable everyday price. So I think this wine is a textbook example of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is the De Morganzon stuff from the same, is that also
De Morganzon? No, De Morganzon is their own stuff, but they actually now bottle a lot of the stuff under Broadbent Selection. So they have like the Vino Verde.
Yep.
You've purchased before.
I've had that in the heat of the summer, especially when I can't get some of the other, things cycle through all the time, as everybody is well aware, ever evolving set. And Broadbent and the rosé I did pretty well with as also.
So they do rosé, and they just came out with 2 Portuguese wines, a Dow White and then a Douro, but the Portuguese side of the Douro red blend, which are in the same vein, inexpensive and delicious, and like just and same thing. So like there in that scenario, he went and blended with the Sograp family of Casa Ferreira. So people that he already imports and has immense respect for, and already have great sources for wonderful grapes, and then he'll go and make a blend there.
I have 2 questions, if I might.
Yeah, please.
One would be, is the granite influenced soil there, is that unique to that particular area versus the Chenin Blanc in France?
It is unique to that area. You will find other places with granite soils, but if you're talking about like compared to Loire Valley, you'll find there much more of you will find some granite there, but there is really influenced by 2 rivers. So what you'll find is what's called alluvial soils, and much more of like the rocks left over from so many years of rivers flowing through that region. But Also, in the same vein, adds a wonderful mineral quality as well.
Which is important, of course, to this type of grape or wine.
Very important to this type of grape. Chenin Blancs love minerality because otherwise they can get super fat, like super viscous, to the point where it seems like it's unbalanced or flabby. But what's also important, I think, in this blend, and that's why it just makes it delicious, because they give themselves the license to blend in Viognier, which the Viognier can also be rich and oily, but also adds these wonderful different, like grilled pineapple and other tropical fruit notes. And then you have the Chardonnay, which then comes and balances out all that and adds, again, some structure and backbone.
I can understand that, yeah.
And
So
then
what do you guys think? I don't know if you've had time to read the tech sheet, but do you think this wine sees oak or no oak?
no oak.
Not a drop. Yeah, this is 100% stainless steel. So
And then the second question, which I think came up before, didn't it, Zach, about wines from South Africa, that it was kind of a sleeper for a long time, but it's now coming on more into the market?
For sure. You still can find a lot of really good value in South Africa, kind of much like in Portugal still. And then it's getting harder to find, or people are figuring it out. So like Stellenbosch, what Matt mentioned. And there's another one with the wolf trap. Is that right?
yeah,
Yeah, like that's another like winery that like used to be in the like 10 range and is now like slowly creeping up because you can only make so much. So it's one of those trade-offs where you find something that you like, buy it up while you can because somebody else is going to figure it out, or at least hopefully that's my job, and then Matt's job as well, is to figure out what everybody likes to drink and try and get them a bottle, or find them something else that they like if they want to switch. I think with you guys joining every week, it's been fun to kind of you're trying new wines every week now, versus finding your favorite and then drinking it all summer. Like when I first met Ed, Lynn was only drinking Entre deux Mer, and then we slowly like have moved around the world, and for me it's been fun to kind of guess what Lynn will like next, and then getting Ed some funky weird reds every once in a while, and some extremely weird North Carolina wine last time, but we ended up we usually finish most bottles. That is one that didn't make it all the way to the end for us too, but it's more about like the idea that kind of goes into the bottle, which is a lot of winemaking. It's this person's expression of, again, what Matt said, like wine is produce. It is a farmed ingredient, and then magically turning it into something with some yeast and some barrels, or in this case not, and kind of seeing what happens using the biochemistry, science, and probably a little bit of luck too.
It's so much fun working with someone who knows us so well and knows the wines that we might like to try next. So that's been a real joy since we're getting more and more into wines. So it's been wonderful, Jack.
that this is why I tell people all the time that wine business or wine shops is the last bastion of the brick and mortar retail, because as many algorithms as they have and computer programming to try to figure out what you like and what it is, there's no substitute for going and talking to your local wine professional at that shop and really getting to know your palate.
That's right. And there's no substitute for actually tasting it to get to know.
That's right too.
I mean, you need both. I think you need the advice and you need to see what you like.
And Matt has been so good about helping refine our tastes. In fact, as you know, Zach, we're drinking more red, which then gets to the question is are there a number of very good red wines from South Africa?
So for me, South Africa is known for Pinotage, which is a very divisive grape. Like either you love it or you hate it in general. I've got one right now. Maybe there might be another one floating around there. They do grow plenty of other stuff in South Africa. I've had the Bry, which is also from Matt, which is a Cabernet Sauvignon that has some Syrah blended into it. Is that right? Or is it?
No, that's 100% cab.
Um,
It's almost, you would think that because it's like got this smoky component to it.
Right, exactly. And yeah, I mean, through Matt's portfolio has quite a big South African influence. So we could easily try not just the, one lonely Pinotage if we want to do a South African theme Reds night one day in a future wine stay. Matt, what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Pinotage because for a long time it had such a stigma that it tasted like Band-Aids.
Yeah.
And so just to give you guys information, so Pinotage was a cross, a genetic cross. So they take the heritage of Pinot Noir and a grape called Cinsault, which was famous for being grown in the Rhone Valley of France, and they genetically crossed these two grapes to create a grape that was more suited for their soils and their what we call terroir, and I can get into that later. And so, but for years they just couldn't figure it out. And also, the other thing is vine age is key to wine. I mean, just to give you a perspective, when you plant a vineyard, the grapes that come off aren't even worthy of even trying to make a wine for a minimum of 3 years. And really, it's 10 years before they're what's considered quality fruit. And then by the time they're 15 to 25, that's like their prime. And then, of course, after that, they start declining in how much they produce. But I go off on that tangent just to tell you that now, after, I mean, what's been like 30 years of commercial success, I think there's actually some pretty good Pinotage. So actually, one you carried from me, or you did carry, the Beaumont.
Beaumont, yeah.
From Broadbent Selections is pretty dynamic.
That is we carry that specifically. There's a young lady who is the great niece of Beaumont family and she used to summer there. So like she used to her sister, her mom used to go and visit, and that it's like they have such a like literal familial tie, and she did live in Durham, and then her mom like comes through occasionally.
Okay.
And so they love that. They always asked me for like the high tier, like Margaret, or so there's a name associated with it I can't quite think of right now, but they would always ask me for that one because that was the holiday wine for them growing up, which of course is not a very from what I remember, it was not super affordable, but it's also their like kind of crown jewel, so it should be what they're putting everything into.
Yeah, but that's a really good example of good Pinotage, and also the Chenin Cup, which is they make a blend with Pinotage, which is really delicious. But I will say also that I think Cabernet Sauvignon coming from Stellenbosch is really world class.
When you talk about the age of the vineyards, they advertise, what are they, old vine wines or something like that. Is that still the prime is within that 15 to 25 years? I mean, even in France and Italy and wherever.
Yeah, 15 to 25, maybe. It depends how healthy your vineyards are, or 30. And when you think of wine, I mean, not also as a farm product, it's a business at the, as well. The wineries have to make their money. You have to make that tough decision of replanting, because when your vines get to up in the years, they start producing less grapes. Now, the quality is very high, but the production is much less. And so you have to but also you have to consider that, well, if I replant, that means 3 years before I can make any wine and 10 years before I can make good wine. So it's really tough. And that's also part of the reason why people will tell you, and I don't know where you guys stand on organics or a whole other thing about biodynamics, but when it comes to organics, 90%, maybe even larger, Zach, if you talk to them, 95% of winemakers or wineries that switch to organics are not doing it because they say, oh, my wine tastes better. They're doing it because their vines will be healthier for longer and thus produce more fruit. So when that, in a very easy to understand terms, when that prime comes between 15 to 25 years, well, all of a sudden that prime becomes 15 to 35 years where those vines are healthy and really producing great fruit.
Right.
I really think that many people, including us until recently, don't understand anything about terroir or about the age of the wines or about the art of winemaking. It's an amazing art and business. Just the more we learn, the more amazed we are.
Yeah, it's
Cool
that's
thing.
one of the main reasons I'm in it. You know, my background was like the specialty side, so like the fine cheese and charcuterie and that kind of stuff. And then I started getting into the beer and wine section when I worked for Whole Foods. And you know, the wine is kind of the equivalent to cheese as far as like you've got this agricultural product that is very precious, and you're turning it into something that is age worthy, that has so many more nuances than just regular, you know, a gallon of milk at the store. You're turning it into something really special, just like, you know, taking a bunch of, you know, tiny sour grapes and turning it into something that, you know, you kind of can stare at or pine over. And then, you know, it's not just like, oh, squish some grapes, throw it into a bottle. There's a lot more that goes into it, which is really, you know, really fun. And that's exactly why I like to drink wine. That's why I like to talk about wine, which is why we're doing these virtual wine stays.
Why you appreciate it. That's why we appreciate
Good,
it.
good. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So if anybody has any more questions about the curator, we can ask him now. Otherwise, we can switch to our second wine. This is
Just a
I'm
quick
gonna fly
follow-up.
the plane
Yeah.
over here. I'm gonna fly the plane to Spain.
Matt's point, is any really good vineyard then is constantly renewing their stock of vines?
Yeah, you try to do it obviously intermittently, you know. Oh, let me replant this section so I don't have to change up everything, and then in a couple of years I'll replant that section, and it goes on like that.
Okay.
Yeah, they also like judge what the market's actually wanting. I was in Oregon a few years ago, and they had ripped up all of their like Chardonnay plants because nobody was buying Willamette Chardonnay, and they planted Pinot Gris because that's what the market demanded. And they were, you know, getting rid of like older Pinot vines to then replant new ones. But again, it's all cyclic, and you don't want to get rid of everything. Or another one we have at the co-op is a single vineyard Gruner Veltliner, and they ripped up all of the vines because the you know, as the winemaker said, the earth was tired and it needed some time. So they're planting cover crops for it and tilling under and all that for like 10 years. And then they're going to replant grapes. And then in another, like Matt said, like 3 to 10 years, they'll have fruit that's good enough for them to actually have another single vineyard, where the fruit that might not make the cut is just going to go into their blend of the other Gruner that they grow. But it's kind of crazy to make a business decision like that, where it's like, okay, these have, you know, I'm going to start producing lower quality or lower yield that I know what the land can do. Let's give it a rest and kind of see what we can do in 2 decades, which, you know, that's the kind of the game that these people have played. But they're also, it's their heritage. You know, people have been, you know, taking over generation after generation, which I think Cune does a very good job with. I know one of the older Rioja producers, and it's also our second wine. So we've got Cune Crianza. Do they make what Reserva, Gran Reserva? Do they make anything higher than that?
Could I interject a question?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Go back to your Gruner Veltliner.
Yeah.
Isn't that a really sweet wine?
No, it's actually, I find it similar to the Chenin as far as like higher acid, more like green apple kind of flavors versus the stone fruits,
Okay.
but can have a really nice minerality to it. You might be thinking of Gewürztraminer, which can be a slightly sweet grape.
I think so. And then that leads to my next question. Do people We don't like a sweet wine at all, but I'm wondering about the market. Is the market 50-50 as far as sweet and other, and not sweet?
No, it's like 5% sweet, at least for me.
Yeah.
I sell like 2 Moscatos under 10, and then I try to sell some fancy Moscato at 15 and 20, and there's not enough momentum behind it for me personally, and in the Durham Co-op at least, to really focus on sweet stuff. There's some amazing sweet wines out there that are on the edge of life changing. Like they can blow your mind of the flavors that you can get with just the profiles that the sugar carrier versus the acid carrier can get. But it's not something that you're just sitting down. For me, I'm not sitting down and popping a bottle of Sauternes or Tokai. Like it's something that you have to have a reason for. It's more celebratory, like champagne is, unfortunately. I think everybody should drink a bottle of champagne a week, but that's a personal preference. It can be affordable if you just, depending on what you do. But it's that kind of thing where I think it because the market got so saturated with white Zinfandel in the early 90s, and then that's what people think of when you think of sweet wine, then there's that misconception that sweet wine can be beautiful, but it's not something that you're necessarily reaching for. Madeira, drinking Marsalas, like those are super nuanced wines, and you're going to get flavors that you will never get from a vintage wine. That's not sweet. I don't know, Matt, do you have anything to say about those?
I tend to feel the same way you do, but then you think about it's honestly regional. In Durham, yeah, you don't have a lot of sweet wine drinkers, but think about the Dublin winery is one of the largest producing wineries in this country, and they make sweet wine.
Sure.
So I don't really think so, and I don't think there's obviously, like you said, the fine sweet wines of the world are a different thing, but there are still a lot of people who want a sweet wine or a semi-sweet wine or Moscato, So, but I will say that I think one of my top 3 wines of my entire life was 1971 Chateau Clément, so one of the famous Sauternes houses, and yeah.
So Matt, do you live in Durham and you're a distributor for wines across the world, or just African wines, or?
No, so I work for Winebow. It used to be known in these parts as the Country Vintner, and we have a portfolio that spans the entire world.
Okay.
We pretty widespread. South Africa happens to be one of our very strong points because we have 2 of the best importers of South African wines, but also Italy is very strong. And then and I don't live in Durham, but I cover all the triangle. I actually live in Holly Springs. Which is why I didn't have a chance to get back home tonight. So
do you travel all over too to learn so much? Have you been in the business for years?
I've been in the business a long time. I have been lucky enough to travel to a good amount of these places. I have not been to South Africa, but I've been to France many times and all over the wine regions, and definitely a couple of the places in Italy, and I've been to, Argentina and all over those places. So, yeah, it's important to go to the places. And as you guys, do you guys travel?
We have, yeah.
The wines never taste. I mean, they always taste better there. Not to say that they taste bad here, but there's something obviously about being there that
Yeah. There's something.
I think for a comparison, you're actually smelling the terroir when you're there versus trying to smell it in the glass. So, like when you go, an easy way for an idea of what terroir is a word called petrichor, which is one of my favorite words, and it's the smell of like the rain on hot concrete. So that smell, like in the city, it finally rains in the summer, it hits the rain, it's like that smell, that's minerality, which can really kind of define some world-class wines as that particular smell. But that's that kind of there's, you know what I'm talking about, like that is a sense of place and
Yeah.
wines are a beautiful vehicle to show that off.
Yeah.
And speaking of a beautiful place, so shall we get into the Cune wine?
I think we shall. I'll share that pretty picture that you sent me if I can
Cool.
find it.
So,
Here, I'll do the tech
Cune.
sheet. I'll do the tech sheet first.
Oh, cool. If you see it, it's C.U.N.E, but it's really a V. So it's Casa Vinicola del Norte de España. And the whole idea and history of Rioja and their winemaking is really fascinating. So this winery started in 1879, and it's actually still the same family that owns it. And just to give you the hard facts, so Rioja, his main grape is Tempranillo. This, as you can see, is a blend. Then after it's 85% Tempranillo, and it's got 15% of two grapes that also grow in Rioja called Garnacha, which we know as Grenache. People often now will argue that Garnacha actually started in Spain and immigrated over to France, and not the other way around. And then another indigenous grape called Mazuelo.
So is that true?
I believe it to be.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, the other thing is, there is the history of Spain and winemaking there literally goes back to the Phoenicians, going through this. So it's centuries and centuries old. And so who knows, but but I think it very much could be true as you think about it when they came across, because when you go and we'll see the Rioja map, Rioja is essentially, you're bordering over France, and France actually plays an unbelievable role in the progression of Rioja wine. And actually how they really got their start on a commercially successful export was, have you guys heard of phylloxera?
No.
No, we've not talked about that little bug yet.
Yeah. So it's an important part of Rioja, because actually, as devastating as it is, without it, we probably would not be drinking Rioja today. So phylloxera is like a little louse, a bug that essentially eats the wood that the vines are the rootstock that the vines are planted on, and it kills the vine, and it'll literally devastate a vineyard. And this happened in the 1880s to Bordeaux. I mean, it wiped them out, really did, to the point where they were actually going over to Spain, and Rioja was the closest, most successful or well-known winery. They were taking wine or grapes from Rioja, making the wine in Bordeaux and bottling it as Bordeaux, because they literally had no grapes or no wine. And once that secret got out, and the Spanish, and I'm sure you guys know the history, but the Spanish were not happy about the French taking their grapes and their wine and calling it Bordeaux. And so one of the other things that historically is amazing about Rioja. Well, I'll ask you guys first. You've tasted this wine, yeah?
Yes.
And anybody else who's on the Zoom right now, please feel free to weigh in. But do you guys think that this wine is oaked, highly oaked, or no oaked, or small oaked, or slightly oaked?
I'll have to take another taste.
I'll have to answer that.
Moderately oaked.
Moderately oaked. So one of the key things about Rioja, especially at this level, Crianza, it's always oaked, unless you see what's called Joven or young. And one of the calling cards of Spanish wine is oak, and it's American oak. And so
Really?
let's talk about oak for a second. So have you talked about what oak does to a wine?
A little bit. We've not done a big thing about oak. We haven't. We've had a handful of oaked wines
Sure.
in Bordeaux tastings, And we talked about the fact that they used oak, but we didn't talk about the differences between, French, Hungarian, Slavonian, American. We haven't talked about like structurally what makes them special.
Okay. So
So when you say it's American oak that they use in Spain, are you talking about American oak trees then?
it's white oak. Yeah, white American oak.
So they import the wood?
They do. Well, they no, there's cooperages in America that made them and sent them over. And
Okay,
actually, and that's what brought me to this point, is actually a big part of when the Spanish Armada in 1588 was destroyed, the whole of Spain really had to find other trade routes for all of their goods because they couldn't get to the rest of Europe really because they were shut down. And you have the conquistadors and everything going to the New World and whatnot. So these what was modern at the time colonial trade routes, they went over there, and trade happened, and they found American oak. And not only that, but American oak is much cheaper than French oak. The other thing about it is the Spanish, kind of like the Germans, used to think that the sweeter the wine, the more sugar that was in the grape, the more noble it was.
I believe that because
Really
it's
hold in
German.
high regard the ageability of wine. So that's why in a wine like this wine, Zach told me tonight, is costs you guys $13.99 a bottle for something that is already 4 years old.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And this is the what's not entry level, but one above entry level. And
Right.
so when you think about that we were talking earlier about values in the world of wine, I've always maintained that Spain is incredible for value. And it even from like $9.99 all the way up to $29.99, you compare those to what you would get in Bordeaux, or, for a wine that age or that highly thought of, you'd pay double.
Yeah.
So oak and American oak has always been a mainstay in Rioja. And one of the things, so oak gives you the ability to age your wine, obviously, but it also, so when you have a grape like Tempranillo, Tempranillo, it's funny, it depends on where you're growing it, because there's some expressions of Tempranillo which are super light and almost like Pinot Noir on some aspects, but in some places, and where these are in areas of Rioja, specific areas of Rioja, which are called Rioja Alta and Rioja Alavesa. There's 3 subregions, but that's
So what do those words mean?
Uh,
High,
Alta, high, and then Alavesa refers to the soil. I can't remember the exact translation right now, but
Okay.
it's a geographic denomination.
Yeah, and they recently just like split up Rioja too. So like these
Mhm.
are like the wine world is ancient, but it's still always evolving and changing. And so they're realizing that, different, even kind of basically sub areas of Rioja are producing vastly different wine, and that they're different enough that they can, go ahead and make them their own kind of region. So that way you can, eventually denote like, oh, this is Rioja Alta, so this is the profile I should expect from this producer in this part of the world.
So is the other part of Rioja Navarra then, or is that just a totally different place?
Say again.
Looking at your map,
Yeah.
Navarra is a totally different place.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I wondered, yeah.
Yeah, and their main grape there is Garnacha. Back
Mhm.
to our somewhat original discussion. Anyway, to simplify, so oak, it adds a couple of things to your wine. So and when you make oak, a barrel, you toast it. Okay, and what happens when you toast a barrel? You're going to get sugars from it, right? Like a caramelization. And so especially when you're talking about French oak will add the flavors to a wine of baking spices, vanilla, cinnamon, things like that. Versus American oak is much more of a savory characteristics, things like dill and sage.
Yeah, I get coconut sometimes too.
Coconut, yeah, definitely on American, yeah, for sure. And that actually plays a big part in, I think, Tempranillo from Rioja. So that really colors in, because just imagine it. I mean, take something that is literally grape juice or just newly fermented juice, and you put it into a new oak barrel. That's a lot of flavor it's imparting. And not only is it imparting flavor, but there's two other things that it can do. You get what's called wood tannin, and wood tannin can change the wine structurally, or at least perceptibly add a backbone to it, add structure. You get that puckeriness, you know, that tannin can add. And then finally, just like anything you put in wood, there is more of an oxygen exchange. So wood is porous, and there is some oxygen going in. And what does oxygen do to a wine? It opens up the aromatics. So Tempranillo from Spain is kind of fascinating when you think about it. You have this grape that can play itself as light as Pinot Noir, being put into a new oak American barrel, which can add some astringency, then the dill, the sage, the coconut, and then some oxygen exchange that allows it to grow and age for this long time. So it's really a wild place when you think about it. And it's always a bear to blind taste Rioja for any wine professional that's into blind tasting, because it always throws you, it's always super tricky. Because some, especially now as you get more modern, some wineries have started to use French oak, or maybe some in this new world, as we, rail against oak, have gone away from the oak, and then you're completely messed up, because you always associate Rioja with American oak. Anyway, so where was I with?
I don't know, but I could ask the question.
Yeah, please.
How many? We're a little older. You look a little younger. So, how many years did it take you to learn all about wines? I mean, that's.
Well, I don't think the question
away.
is how many years. It's how many glasses, bottles.
That's good.
We're trying to catch up.
Yeah, we're trying really hard.
Yeah, I've learned a lot this year.
Yeah.
Yes, COVID is. Well, Zach has plenty, so you have plenty of time to catch up.
That's true.
Well, I don't know whether we'll ever catch up, because it seems as if there's so much that's exciting, but maybe not enough time to learn.
That's fun too, though.
Yeah, and you don't have to know everything, but the fun part is coming on things like this. And honestly, I mean, look at it tonight. We have like a couple of other people, and I think about it. These things are invaluable. I mean, to have somebody like Zach at your disposal, and then for us just to have this back and forth, and so many people don't take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's why we've been trying to post them on line as well. So the day after we have a Wines Day, we post the previous night's Wines Day, so that you can always watch it on your computer, much like your podcast. Just to kind of take it home. And we're considering some other stuff, so make it a little more accessible. I'm not sure. I wish I could just give like little 4-ounce bottles of wine to everybody, but it's not quite that easy yet. But I think
that is one thing that COVID has also made more, not accessible, but better sales on half bottles, because there's so many virtual tastings during COVID, and you don't want to take the whole bottle home and it's a tasting, so people are trying to find half bottles to do tastings with.
Yeah, and I've considered that for some of the higher end wines that are available. If you have a half bottle, $375 or $187 list, send it my way.
Oh, do they have such a thing as half bottles?
Oh yeah, there's quite a few half bottles. The problem is that the glass costs the same amount of money for a full bottle as it does a half bottle. So the perceived value isn't really there, because you're going to spend $15 a bottle instead of $22 a bottle and get half as much wine. So it's a kind of a trade-off of the convenience of having 2.5 glasses versus spending a little more and having 5. But then if you have a 4-bottle tasting, that's quite a bit of wine for somebody to drink in a 3-day period, or whatever your storage situation is. But we're trying to figure out the best solution. So Matt, as far as Crianza, that's 6 months of aging in oak, is that right?
The requirement is 2 years of aging, and you can do it as you see fit. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It does require 1 year in bottle and 1 year in oak.
Okay.
And then when you get into the next level as Reserva, that's 3 years of aging, and that also requires at least 1 year in one bottle, 1 year in oak, 1 year in bottle. With the other year, you can do so as you see fit, but it needs to be aged. And so that's why at Crianza level, we're drinking something that is 2016, like I said before, that's 4 years old at this point and is the current release.
Get that age for that.
Matt, what is the name of your podcast?
It's called North Carolina Food and Beverage
Okay.
Podcast.
Yeah.
NC, if you just search wherever you listen, NC space F&B, you'll find it.
Okay.
And if you want to send me that, I can send that out to you guys as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you a link.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to share that information next week too when we have Boxcar Handmade Cheese joining us, because you just did a feature with them.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I'll see if I can send you guys the unreleased version so you can get a sneak
Taste.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Good.
What else? I mean, yeah, Spain is really, like I said, I mean, it's, Tempranillo grows prolifically there, but it's very different from region to region there. Like I said, and from Ribera del Duero, as you get west to as you get further south, and Spain gets very hot and you get closer to the Mediterranean, it can be really different. So, but Rioja, now has become, especially when you think of they have 140 years of commercial success in winemaking. They're really getting to know their vineyards and making some of the best stuff in the world, especially if you like, what would be the equivalent like Bordeaux or hardy oaked reds.
Right. Yeah. Do you guys like this one as well?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, we really do.
That's very good, yes.
Yeah.
That's
And we would say if we didn't.
Oh, I know.
kind of
I still get bottles with notes on them. I'm very well aware of how you handle things.
Yeah.
kind of a lighter wine, and I think, Matt, you were comparing it to a Pinot.
Well, what I was saying is that Tempranillo, and I don't think this wine you would compare to a Pinot Noir, but the grape itself can sometimes, if it's unoaked, and there are some expressions what they call joven, which means they're not oaked at all, and they're just aged in stainless steel and then bottled maybe for 6 months before release. Those expressions of Tempranillo can be very light and more akin to something like a Pinot Noir.
Yeah, we've got one at work that doesn't have any oak to it, and doesn't have the denseness, and it kind of tastes like roasted strawberries, like light bodied, very fruit driven, no tannin, and it's just meant to be like, table wine. And that's what it is. Just like the Joven, which you don't see a whole lot in the States. They usually just drink it there, right?
Yeah, I think as their commercial business has expanded, you've seen a little bit more, because again, when you think about the business, well, if I have to sit on my wine that I've already made, that I've already taken, all this time to cultivate, and then I have to wait another 2 years before I can even bottle it and then sell it. So let's come up with Joven and get
Right.
So yeah.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, does anybody have any other questions?
Just before we sign off, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And yeah.
My pleasure. It's always fun to talk with people like you are genuinely enthusiastic about wine, and you ask great questions. So it makes me remember so much more stuff that I'd already forgotten.
Yeah, it's these
Great.
have been
Thank you so much.
very
We really
fun.
appreciate it.
So this about wraps up the Wines Day. Next week, we have a special Cheese Wines Day with Sam from Boxcar Handmade Cheese. And then on the 23rd, Matt is joining us again. We're going to have some bubbles, since we're almost into, New Year, and Christmas is obviously a really great time to drink some bubbles. And we're working on hopefully delicious red wine that we are going to be announcing next week, if not later this week. give you some suspense. And yeah, so if anybody has any other questions, please ask them now. Otherwise, we will see you next Wednesday.
We'll be here.
Thank you.
Right. Thank
Thanks,
you all very
everybody.
much. Thank you, Matt, very much for joining. As
Thanks
well
for
as
having me,
everybody
Zach.
else. And we'll see you later.
See you later, Zach. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.